Today we're taking a look at the NeuralDSP Mesa Boogie Mark II C+ suite. We are officially out of our depth on this channel, and I am really excited about that. Today we are taking a look at the Neural plugin suite for the Mesa Mark II C+ amplifier, a legendary and revered amplifier that has kind of served as the tonal bedrock for so many of the kind of pantheon of guitar gods, people like Steve Lukather and James Hetfield and John Petrucci, and all of these like incredibly important and influential guitar players. And this is the time in the video where I tip my hand, as I sometimes do, and reveal that I am not a guitar player's guitar player. I'm not a guitarist's guitarist. My musical lexicon is not based in, my musical history is not born out of kind of guitar god culture. I listened to some Metallica growing up, but I wouldn't consider myself to be somebody with like a really strong understanding or familiarity with Dream Theater or Metallica or Toto or any of the kind of bands that are kind of like hailed as pioneers of the guitar tones found in this amplifier. And while that may offend a lot of guitar players on the internet, and potentially deservedly so, I do think that it poses an interesting opportunity here, which is we are not looking at this new Neural plugin from the perspective of, can it recreate tone X or Y from album X or Y, nor are we looking at it from how accurate is it to the original analog Mark II C+ and C++, because I don't know what that amplifier sounds like. I've never played one. We are instead looking at it from the perspective of, on a part-by-part basis, how effective is this plugin? How well does it suit what I need it to do? I'm not recreating Metallica riffs on this channel. I am not shredding like John Petrucci does. I'm instead writing the music I always write. I am focusing on the genres and touch points that I feel connected to, and we're taking a look at how effectively this plugin can serve those areas. And I think the much more important question than can it recreate X or Y is, does it sound good? Will it get you where you need to be? Will it accomplish the kind of goals that you have for it outside of a recreating a classic album kind of thing? And for my money, I think that the answer so far has been resoundingly yes. So let's talk about what is in this plugin, why it's so versatile, and what I kind of think are like these standout features that have nothing to do with the kind of pantheon of guitar god that have made this sound famous. So for those of you uninitiated in the NeuralDSP world, let's do a really quick high-level overview of what a plugin like this entails. Most of Neural's plugins are going to be structured pretty similarly, especially of all the more recent releases that they've done, where you have your pre-effects, your amplifier, your cabinets, an EQ section, and your post-effects, which are going to be, in this case, your delay and your reverb. In the pre-effects in this Mesa plugin, you have a compressor, 2 drives, and a chorus pedal. That chorus pedal is going to be very era-appropriate, very 80s, lush, swirling chorus. The compressor is a very simple kind of 2-knob compressor with a switch for fast and slow, and I really like the compressor. It's incredibly simple. There's no kind of like nuanced attack and release control scheme. It's just that one switch, but I'm finding that this thing can be used as a great clean boost or a really effective squashy compressor. All that 2-hand tapping stuff that I did on that intro is all thanks in no small part to how kind of well-balanced and aggressive that compressor can get. You've got 2 overdrives, a lower gain one and a much higher gain one that, aside from having the 3 knobs, also has a bright switch that I find to be very, very well-balanced and effective. And then the amp itself has an insane amount of control available. You have 2 different amplifiers. You have your rhythm and your lead channels on both. You have a 3-band EQ. You have push-pull controls for brightness, depth, bass boost, and a 5-band graphic equalizer as well to really kind of get you exactly where you need to be before you even hit that post amplifier EQ scheme. There's a ton of gain on tap. It cleans up really, really well. And you can switch around to the back of the amplifier to control your presence, your amp reverb, and to switch between Class A and simul-class power amp voicings. There is a lot of control there. And that's what I find so compelling about this thing more than anything else about this plugin is this amp scheme itself. The Mark II C Plus control scheme just has such an insane amount of versatility. So many different ways to boost or clean or dirty up your amplifier and exactly the frequency bands that you want for exactly the right voicings that you need for the parts you're writing. And again, once you've gotten all of that stuff dialed, all of those EQ controls on the amp, you have a post-amp 9-band graphic EQ that sounds great and will kind of let you further refine everything exactly where you need it. You can adjust so many hyper-specific frequencies in this plugin. It's really great. The cab sim controls are great. You've got multiple cabinets, I think 10 microphones, and like hundreds of IRs that get pulled up by adjusting your mic distances and your mic placement. Each microphone also has a room control with an adjustable, separate adjustable gain control that I find to be incredibly helpful. Room control on an IR is underrated, and I really like it. And pro tip, if you already have IRs you love, you can load your third-party IRs into this plugin as well. And in those post effects, you have a really killer 80s style hall reverb that can be as subtle as you need it to be, or it can go like full-on soundscaping. And again, like I said, there's a reverb control in the amp as well. So you actually have this like massive stereo hall reverb, or a much more kind of practical, true to life amp reverb available to you as well, which is really great. And then the delay itself is excellent. It is a Bucket Brigade style stereo delay that can be kind of run in or out of sync for the two delay lines. But you know what's a trip is some of the coolest stuff about this plugin is not even hyper specific to this plugin. It's more kind of like the stuff that Neural is capable of in general. And we're talking about the transposer and the doubler. This plugin has a polyphonic transposer that is incredibly low latency, sounds really good. You heard it on that intro. I ended up making a bunch of specific presets in my version of this plugin that basically just make fake baritone. Like takes everything I'm playing, transposes it down a fifth, and I'm playing complex chords, I'm playing lead lines, I'm like ripping with it, and it keeps up super well. The transposition in this thing is really good. And the second thing is that stereo widening tool. It's really good, and I often kind of double track guitars and pan them out. This being able to do that for me saves me a lot of time. It's really wonderful. I think that there's a lot of great use cases for that stereo widening tool, and the fact that you can control the width from like 3 milliseconds up is incredibly helpful in terms of getting exactly the amount of width that you want out of that kind of like wide guitar presence. Like I said, this thing is shockingly versatile. The clean tones in this thing are lush and rich and sparkly. The EQ allows you to kind of get almost any flavor of clean tone you want out of it. You can create something warm and mid-rangey, something dark and brooding, or something that has a lot of that sparkle, and that compressor and chorus can really take that great clean sound and elevate it into something really, really record worthy that I think is very impressive. And the gain on this thing is pretty otherworldly. Like I think that's probably what this amplifier is predominantly known for, given the names that are kind of associated with the amplifier. But it is worth saying for somebody who doesn't have a lot of knowledge of this amplifier and kind of the spaces in which it's traditionally used, that it is wonderfully high gain. It doesn't sound trashy, it doesn't sound thin, it doesn't sound like a can of bees. I mean, it can if you want it to, because you have a billion EQ controls, but I have found that I get exactly the sounds that I want. And I have very, very kind of narrow, specific ideas for high gain that I like. I don't like that super riffy open back sound traditionally, but you can get a really, really great version of that kind of thing that sounds true to what I want. And that's, I think, a big deal, because like I said, an amplifier like this can kind of live on the laurels of what it was used for in kind of its halcyon days. But for me, who has no appreciation for that era, it sounds damn good for like my use cases. And that's a big deal, because my use cases are really narrow and pretty non-traditional in a lot of ways. And I think on that note, we need to stop talking and we need to get into the sound samples. We are going to walk through a bunch of the presets that I made, guitar specific stuff, non-specific stuff, the octave up kind of shimmery bell sounds, the fake baritone stuff, the cleans, the gain. We'll run through the kind of like scope on the overdrives and all that stuff for sure. And really just kind of like try to piece by piece make our way through what makes the Mark II C+ such a formidable plugin. Before we jump into the plugin, let's go ahead and run through a little bit of quick housekeeping. I am playing my Jennings Voyager with McNelly Chaplin humbuckers in it that I think sound amazing. And we are recording in Universal Audio's Luna DAW. The way that we are monitoring and recording our guitar right now is a little bit of an interesting workaround. I find that guitar plugins tend to have a fair amount of latency when you run them inside of a DAW. They're more effective in my mind as reamping tools than live playing when you use it in your DAW. And that's important because we are not running the Mesa plugin in our DAW. We are running it as a standalone plugin. And the way that we are recording it right now is if we go into our settings, you will see that we have virtual channels 1 and 2 set as our output devices. And that is because in Console by Universal Audio, we have our Mac audio right over here. That's our virtual channel combination 1 and 2. And so that is then the input channel for our plugin. And so because of that, we get latency free. Guitar monitoring, which is really, really handy. On the intro track, I recorded DI guitar as well as the live take in this same way. But here we are only recording, as you can see, only recording the affected guitar. So there's no reamping, tweaking happening in post for this portion of the video. Let's get back into our plugin and talk through some of our settings and some of my kind of like favorite patches that I've got. We're starting things off with my Voyager clean and mellow sound, which is the first sound you heard on that intro track, that really mellow kind of like opening guitar part. And right off the bat, you can hear kind of like the quality of 80s hall reverb and that compressor doing some good work and everything. I love this compressor. It can be as kind of like subtle and out of the way as you want it to be. Or as squashy as you need it to be. Let's bring that reverb down for the purposes of this. It's a great compressor, and that fast attack is also really great for some of those like two-hand tapping, especially for my particular brand of incredibly sloppy two-hand tapping. I really, really love this compressor. It's very, very good. From there, we can jump over to, and while we're here, we'll come back to those overdrives for one of the heavier things. I think we're gonna divide this up into like clean tones, gainier tones, and then weirder stuff. Over here, you also have this chorus. And again, it's really nice to have that really kind of like aggressive compressor and a nice lush chorus for when you want that kind of like. That compressor really does some work on that kind of stuff. you know, versus no compressor. I love the compressor on this thing, especially as a boost. So you can take that comp way down, but use that level to really really lush chorus, which I love. Let's reset those settings and use this as an opportunity to jump over to those wet effects, because we'll just touch on these really quick and then we'll really kind of dive into the meat that is the amplifier itself. I've got a couple of tricks that I really like for this delay in particular that I think is really cool, which is, you can see right here, there is about 3.5 millisecond difference between our left and our right channels here. And there's a reason for that. And the reason is you've got your syncable delay, you've got the ability to kind of choose between note divisions or milliseconds, and then a single mode or a dual mode. In single mode, you have that standard delay. Let's open it all the way up, give it a kind of nice amount of presence for this delay. And so that's your nice kind of like standard. But when you jump it into dual mode, it becomes, let's jump over to notes. You end up with like a hard left and a hard right delay line, as opposed to kind of stacked dual delay. Which is really great, but you might want a little bit more flexibility in those two options. And one of my favorite little tricks here, setting both delays at the exact same subdivision, gives you that mono delay line again. And then when you jump back over to milliseconds, you can just drag one of them ever so slightly off. And now you have like kind of like your own self-made Haas effect stereo widening tool on just that delay. Which is really nice if you want that width, but you don't want two separate subdivisions. It's a great little trick. I'm a big fan of it, as you can tell. And then just by jumping between those time types again, you get back to... You've got some great high cut, low cut controls for modifying your delay. Let's take it wide open. Great bucket brigade kind of sound. But like I said, with that low roll off, you can get like a really pretty convincing tape sound. Or you can get like a really nice murky delay by rolling off that high. Which for a lot of those rhythm guitar parts on that intro, I find to be very, very helpful as a way to kind of keep that heaviness in your guitar. I like that kind of like added grit of a delay after my distortions and everything, but kind of made a little bit more subtle. And again, drag one of those just a little bit out and all of a sudden you've got which is great. And of course, get your little tap tempo over here, which I don't actually think does anything. It does not. But down here, you do have your tap tempo. So this is your tap down here, or you can type in the exact subdivision or tempo that you want. You also have a built-in metronome, which is really handy. Let's jump over to our reverb. It sounds predictably great. I tend to like dark reverbs. I like really big sounding reverbs that I then darken way up so that my guitar kind of can still sit on top. But if you widen this thing all the way out and take your knobs to noon, you end up with a really massive sounding sparkly reverb. It can be made nice and subtle. Or you can go full cosmonaut on this thing, create something really lush that drifts forever. And again, throw that delay in the mix. Let's jump over to subdivisions, make it nice and long, and then slightly drag them out a little bit. Keep the lows from getting too muddy. And again, jumping back over to this starting position here, let's crank that compressor, get a little bit of chorus. The reason we're cranking the compressor is so that I can do some really like janky guitar swells. But here's the fun thing. That's all well and good. Like, that's some classic delay and reverb and compressor and chorus ambience, you know, the usual stuff, the thing that you can make with your own pedal board as well. Where this gets really interesting is, let's dial that mix back a little bit. If you want to kind of like further make this sound really spacey and wonderful, you've got this great kind of starting position. Let's even jump back to our stock sound. Say, this is all well and good. I threw in the chorus. I want it to be more ambient, more spacey. Doubler. And that thing can be narrower or way more spread out. Let's take those delay and reverbs out really quick. You've got up to 20 milliseconds of stereo spread separation, which is really wide. I actually really love like 3 milliseconds, like just barely anything. I tend to not like hard panned stuff in that way. I'm a bigger fan of kind of just off to the side of center. And then, like I said, you throw those back into the mix. Open that treble back up on that reverb. Okay. And again, you can even take it further than that. I give you wind chimes in space. We have our doubler on, as you can see, 3 milliseconds. But here's the real magic right here, is we are transposing up an octave. And let's take these out really quick and hear what's happening. So it is literally what I said it is. It is polyphonic octave transposition, or polyphonic transposition. So and a ton of compression. You will get, of course, some artifacts and some weirdness here and there with this kind of thing. It feels pretty much inevitable everywhere, but for my money, it tracks really well. And like I said, it does chords. It can even do some weird chords. Oop, and then it got a little weird. But it does pretty well. And like I said, in context of what I'm using this sound for, I really love it. Really fun, really cool. Let's jump over to something a little bit heavier. Okay, as we jump over to our heavier guitar section in this video, we are also switching over to my Josh Williams Stella. And that's for two reasons. Reason number one being this is the most rock and roll guitar I own, and I think it's only fitting to use it in this context. I mean, look at this thing. And two, if you look over at our presets here, I have a couple of like my heavy sounds that are voiced for my Josh Williams. And that's because, like I said, with this plugin, you have so much tonal control across the board that being able to kind of voice things very specifically like this is incredibly handy. So here is my kind of like quote unquote heavy chords sound. I was not kidding about that high gain thing. I love it. And this is another great example of being able to use that doubler for instant double tracking. Really, really cool. Let's break down this stuff into kind of the sum of its parts. Let's pull out, for context really quick, we have the lead circuit engaged right now, and we're hitting it with that overdrive 2. But let's go ahead and take a step back. Let's pull that lead circuit out to kind of get down to this kind of crispier, almost edge of breakup-y kind of sound. And let's look through our overdrives a little bit. You can run your pedal board into the front of a plugin like this to surprisingly good effect for the record. I have found that the Neural stuff does a surprisingly good job of taking my pedal board. The Tone King is a great example of that. But in this context, we are only working inside of the plugin itself. And so these are the effects available to us in this context. So let's get into it. You have, like I said, that compressor, which can work in this context, is a really good clean boost to just hit that amp a little bit harder. Which is a great way of getting more gain out of this amp without foundationally changing the voicing. And you can add a little bit of that compression, and if you want just a tiny bit more, that's sustain. Up next, we have overdrive number 1, which is going to be, for my money, a lot more transparent and a lot lower gain than overdrive number 2. Again, this is another one of those ones that I really like to use as kind of like a level booster. I really like that sound. I literally stumbled onto this particular thing during the last take of this section of the video for a little insider baseball, and realized that this kind of like edge of breakup sound plus this overdrive is something really, really great. It's like a really good mid-gain kind of like rhythm overdrive sound. Yeah, it's great. Sounds really wonderful. It's got some gain on tap if you want to push it. But again, it stays relatively clean, which is really nice. And I should say, you can juice it with that compressor to great effect. You kind of accidentally become like an old school guitar player whenever you kind of get that sound. No matter how much I want to kind of like live in that, you know, all of my go-to voicings and idiosyncrasies and tendencies in playing guitar and everything. When you get this sound, you immediately just start going back into that like kind of go, you go boomery really quickly. Okay, let's jump over to, that's a great combination right there. Actually, I'm gonna, right here, there we go. And then we're gonna name it Josh Williams Guitars, Boomery. Yep, that works. If it was more compressed, we would call it Bloomery, but it's not, so we won't. Let's jump over to this overdrive number 2, which is going to be your higher gain and your more colored overdrive. You got this bright switch on top. Tone control. And a lot of gain. It's fun. It's really hard not to go full riffiness at all points in this video. You've never once heard me write a song on this channel that involves anything remotely close to. And yet here we are. This is where we learn how bad of a guitar player I actually am, because this plugin makes me want to like bring out my non-existent inner guitar god. In this context, let's jump over to the amp head itself. There is a lot that you can do here. It is shocking. You've got your volume 1, your master 1, and your 3-band EQ. This is all going to be like present at all times. And then we have this kind of additional EQ over here that's not currently engaged. So volume 1 is going to get you everything from your like nice pristine cleans up through kind of like bass level amp breakup. Which can then be further pushed with that Master 1 control. You can get a surprising amount of gain without even engaging that lead. And then you also have your treble control. Yeah, you know how it is. Your bass control, I like keeping the bass pretty low in this thing. Too much bass gets really me, so I tend to run that bass south of 5 pretty much at all times. And then a nice mid-range control. And I love that because it never sounds quacky. That mid-range always sits really, really nicely. And then you have a push-pull for your bright. You've got your push-pull for your bass. It's basically your, I should say it's your shift control. With over here on master being your deep push-pull, which I almost always keep out. It's just a great alternate voicing to this kind of standard bass control. You can really kind of like take that bass really low and keep that pull, that deep pull out. For kind of a more present low end. I'm not sure how to describe what it is that I kind of find so useful about this. But I love it. And then over here we have our lead control, which immediately takes you into and in this context, you have now a bright control for that lead master. And you have your lead drive and your lead master as separate controls too. So you've got your input gain on that lead circuit. And your lead master. And if you want to, you just turn all of them up and let it be chaos. Yeah, it's a lot. Turn those both back off. Let's jump back over to that amplifier. We'll circle back around to this. Actually, no, let's touch on this EQ right now. So let's bring in this 5-band EQ. Again, it's so useful to have so many stages at different points in the gain kind of process to be able to adjust and fine-tune different frequencies in your EQ spectrum. And it mostly just saves problems down the line, which I love. So bringing in that EQ. You've got your 80, which is great for cutting out a lot of low crap. It's important to have different ways to fix the same problem. So you've got that deep circuit and you got that bass control. So like if we crank up our low end on this thing, or we can cut low end using the bass control. We can increase and decrease our low end using that push pull, or we can increase and decrease our low end using this 80 shelf. I guess it's only a shelf if you want to use it that way. But so let's go ahead. Let's take that EQ circuit out. Let's crank the bass too far up and make sure that we are pulling out that deep control. That's a lot of low end. That's arguably more low end than you would normally want in your guitar signal. You're going to be sitting on like some frequency ranges that your bass player and your keys player are normally going to want to use, and they're not going to be thrilled about it. But you literally can just go in here and shelve 80 down. You can take it completely out if you wanted to. Which does have a lot of value. Or just kind of like mostly out. It's just, like I said, it's about having the right tools for the job, and having multiple options for those right tools is incredibly, incredibly useful. You got some great low and mid and high controls as well. And it's great because it's specific spots that you can kind of like add gain and hit your kind of like point of tube breakup in very specific areas, which is really helpful. Again, with this EQ out, this is where we're at gain-wise. It's very edge of breakup. But now we're getting more gain because we're hitting 750 much harder. So you get like a different version of a mid presence than you would if you just turned up that middle gain or the middle tone knob. Like, you hear how clean that gets. You can create something kind of like really warm and sparkly by pulling the right frequencies down as much as by pushing the right frequencies up. I mean, that EQ out. And that EQ in. If you dial that back. It's that presence, that sparkle. Really warms things up when you take it down. Yeah, it's fascinating. This control scheme is great. It's almost like this amp is popular for a reason. Look, I'm learning in real time why people love the Mark II C+ so much. So thank you for coming on this journey with me. Jump around to the back of the amplifier, and now you have your, like I said, your presence control and an amp reverb. So let's go ahead and take out our wet effects really quick, just so that we can kind of engage honestly with the amp reverb on this thing. great little spring reverb. Like I said, it's that exact right amount of subtle in a way that I think is very helpful. Just by adding a little bit of vibe, and then you have that presence control, which all the way up. You get a lot more bite, I think is probably the word there. But like I said, I'm a big fan of warmth, and so I dial that presence pretty far back, but not to 0, because you kind of lose a sense of presence. Yeah, that probably should have seen that coming. But there's a sweet spot just below 5, in my opinion. Maybe right at 5. Yeah, that presence control is great. And then finally, you have simulclass or class A, which will change the voicing of your power amp. I'm a fan of the simulclass. So let's take this opportunity to jump over to the C++. We'll take that EQ back out. And you can hear there's, let's try and approximate the same settings. Let's take right about, yeah, let's go flat everything on both amps. And EQ out. And then let's listen to kind of like one and the other. A little bit woolier, a little bit rounder, and a little bit more gain, if I'm not incorrect there. We've got presence at 5, so yeah, the presences should be pretty much. Yeah, a little bit more gain on this thing. The wooliness was probably a presence thing. But yeah, you've got a little bit more gain on this thing. Truth be told, I don't know structurally what the difference between the two amplifiers is. If you know, get in the comments. I feel like there's a more pronounced and present mid-range in this version of the amplifier. That might be my ears playing a trick on me. I'm not sure, but I like it a lot, especially for higher gain stuff. I think that this one's pretty excellent in a lot of ways. Let's kind of like dial up a little bit of that sound we were going for earlier. A little bit of treble, that depth, some bass cut, a little bit of mid-range push. And yeah, it's a great sounding. Smoother? Is that what I'm hearing? I think it feels a little bit smoother. The terms we guitar players use to try to describe tone is hilarious and stupid. But again, this is a great starting place. It's a great rhythm tone. If you throw that doubler on there and give it just a hair of that nice dark delay, pretty happy right off the bat. But then you can also jump between different voicings via that cabinet control. You've got three great systems, or three great cabinet options, I should say. And then a much like kind of quackier double 2x12 thing. And yeah, and then once you have kind of that like, and once you've got that kind of like dialed in guitar tone that you love, you've got three great cabinets to choose from. You've got this 4x12 right here. A little less low end, the slanted 4x12. And then 2x12s. The 2x12s are fascinating. There's like a really interesting mid presence to them. I love the low end response in this center cabinet choice. That just feels like filling an arena style guitar tone. And then from there, you've also got all of your insane mic selections and everything. So let's jump back to that middle one. And I've got a 57 on one side and a 121 on the other. Let's take that 121 out and hear that 57. And immediately, let's go back here, flip the amp around, roll that presence down just a tiny bit, as I am wont to do. And you've got tons of control here. You've got like... You've got your distance and your position, so you can get it like right up on that cone, and then drop your guitar pick. For the sharpest guitar tone you've ever heard in your entire life. Or better guitar tone by moving it away. And I love this too, because you can keep it right on that cone and just like dial that distance way out and get that like really roomy. And like literally dragging this thing around is pulling up hundreds of new IR options as you move those things around. We've got that room control engaged right now. If you take that out, you end up with... Let's take our delay back out. really kind of hear the difference with that room control. Let's actually jump back to, let's pull up the original version of this preset that we're on right now. Take out that drive. Do we want to leave the compressor in? Yeah, we'll leave the compressor on. Take our wet effects out. We've got that amp verb on. Let's get rid of that for a second and jump back to our speakers. We'll take that compressor out. I like that clean tone. Okay, like I said, we pull out that ribbon. And the difference between having that room in there and not in there is pretty significant. And then bring that in. At full volume, it can be a little aggressive. But this is what's so great about the control scheme here. You've got, I think we just clipped, you've got the ability to kind of bring in just as much room as you want. And then, like I said, bring in that 121. And what's fascinating is you end up being able to create guitar tones that you basically would not be able to create. You can craft some functionally impossible stuff using this. Like, I don't know of a way without miking two separate cabs in two separate rooms to set two different room levels on microphones, or to be able to kind of like have the roominess of a 57 with no roominess on the 121. Like, this is like some impossible kind of like, it only happens in digital trickery kind of. But it's incredibly, incredibly nice to have that option. And of course, like I said, you've got two different, you've got, I think, 10 different microphones. You've got dynamics, you've got condensers, you've got some ribbons, and you have two different actual speaker cone options as well. Two different speakers you can select between. You have a 2004 V30 and a 2003 V30. Do I know the difference between those two things? I do not, but I do know that they sound a little bit different. So, you know. Do with that information what you will. And I also like that you can pan them if you want to. Let's match mic levels if we're going to do that. And again, we're back to that kind of like two different ways of accomplishing the same thing. You've also got or with the doubler off, you've got. So you literally can add stereo widening or pan your two microphones out as two different methods of accomplishing a like double tracked stereo with guitar thing. So you get your mic levels where you want, you've got your mic positions where you want, you have your amp all set up and dialed. And then you jump over to this EQ system, which is so robust and adds so much to kind of being able to further tweak every little bit of your tone to exactly where you need it to be. So resetting this plugin, we've got everything where we want it to be. I tend to do, like, as you can see from here, as little as humanly possible with this EQ section, because I like to be as close to done as possible. But it's wonderful to have this to just kind of like clean some stuff up. It's EQing that isn't going to affect your gain staging the way that the EQs on the amplifier will. And it's incredibly robust. Again, you've got access to that kind of like low shelf. A great way to like deal with troublesome frequencies. Yeah, it's really, really helpful. It's great to be able to just, like I said, you can do big sweeping changes. I'm a big fan of very subtle changes in this context. And yeah, and then you're off to your wet effects again. And that's most of everything in this plugin, with one exception, which we did cover already. It's the transposition, but I think it bears calling attention to the fact that you have and that's the coolest thing in the world. You've got access to this absolutely insane transposition control. So you can literally go from like a I didn't mean to do that, but that was really funny. Let's go with the 4x12. I think this one sounds a little bit more menacing. Again, it's insane, and it tracks really well. And it's great when it's clean.